Okay, so today we're going to start looking at how the sky works in this model. This is an old video that I did with my wife's makeup mirror that unfortunately no longer exists, and I can't find one that does this the way that this did. It was a double magnification mirror, but the way that it was shaped, it had a really cool infinity line where when you moved, it didn't matter what direction you moved, everything moved perfectly in the opposite direction. There was a little bit of distortion in the mirror, but not much. It was a really, really good piece of glass, and it no longer exists. It got broken, unfortunately. But if we're looking at this, we're looking at, in this example, not saying that there is a mirror in the sky, but looking at the sky as a surface that we can see through into the cosmos that's below us. So the cosmos in this model is wider, much wider below the Earth. So when I'm looking at the sky, even though I can see 100% of the sky as far as the surface above me, which is what it would be on a flat Earth, I can only see 50% of the cosmos because it's like a looking glass. It's like a mirror that's kind of parabolic shaped, where depending on what way I'm looking inside of that, depends on what I'm going to see behind me or underneath me in this case. So we're not saying there's a mirror in the sky. I'm saying that the surface of the sky is a reset, and when I pass through that, I'm not passing through to the outside. I'm passing through to the inside on the exact opposite side, on the underneath side of this huge sphere. Now, Earth doesn't connect together perfectly that way because of the map that we're using, but I believe in the concept of, if you apply the concept of this to a map with the reset, with the edge exactly as far as it needs to be from every destination on the outside, that's the way that you triangulate it, and it resets in every direction. So you don't. One of the maps that I saw that was really cool that somebody had made was a map with two circles, right? So you have the northern half and you have the southern half, and you rotate those circles around to match the land. That was really cool. That's a really cool concept. Kind of the way this wraps, kind of the way it works. But I want to try to describe it in as three-dimensional as possible. When we're thinking about it. So, but that's a cool concept, and it's very much similar to what we're talking about here. So if we're looking at this, we're starting out on the North Pole. This is not a perfect pile of salt, but I poured 2 piles of salt on the board. And also I made the celestial equator way wider than it should be. So we're actually looking across the distance of 3 circumpolar rotations when we actually look at this. But the point is, as you move across the surface, because you're gathering a different angle to the surface of the sky, you're seeing a different portion of the cosmos that's below because it's way wider than that surface. And this surface is looking into the entirety of the cosmos when you think about the way this works. So you're not going to miss any of it, but you have to be standing on a certain portion of the Earth to see the part of it that you want to see. For example, if you were standing on the equator, so if we look at the equator is in every direction here, right? And if you were standing down here on the equator, over the course of a full year, you would see every star in the sky, pretty much, because of the way it rotates around during the year. So if we're imagining this, we're standing on the North Pole. And if I'm standing on the North Pole at night looking up at the sky, I'm going to see 100% of the 50% of the sky that I can see, right? Because the sky that's blocked is by the sun. Half of this is lit up. But if you're standing on the north in the Arctic in the wintertime and you have a clear sky and you look above your head, if you were standing on the pole, all of the stars down to the equator in every direction would be moving above you. So in our model, the edge is in all directions, right? There is no edge. But the equator, if I start off at the North Pole and I travel this way, I'm going to get to the equator here. If I start off and I travel this way, I'm going to get to the equator here. So when we equate the sky to the surface, the celestial equator is right above the equator of the Earth. It never moves. It's stationary. The celestial equator will always be where the celestial equator is. What does move is the sun and the planets and the moon, right? From our perspective, and comets and things like that. But from our perspective, when we're watching the sun is moving throughout the year, 23.5 degrees to the north, 23.5 degrees to the south and back. Right? That's every year. And in the book of Enoch, there are 144 positions of the sun, which unbelievably matches time and date. The sun doesn't move every day in the heliocentric model. It kind of sticks in a position, which is why solstice is called solstice, because at solstice, the sun just kind of stays in the sky. And this is explained in the heliocentric model. I'm not saying there's not an explanation for it, but that's what we observe, the 144 positions of the sun recorded by Enoch throughout the year. So if we're thinking about standing in the North Pole and I'm looking to the equator, right, I'm seeing the stars at the North Pole that are above the equator on the edge of my horizon. This would be 6,225 miles approximately. So it's 6,225 miles here, 6,225 miles here, 6,225 miles here, and here. Now, we know that beyond equinox, the sun starts to get lower and lower on the horizon, below the horizon, if I'm standing on the North Pole. So we know that we're seeing the stars that are above the equator on what the heliocentric model is calling a globe, right? Even though our horizon is only like 3 or 4 miles away from us, the tangent of that goes all the way down to the stars that are on the equator, and we're watching those circle around that horizon on the North Pole. But distance is important. We know that we can see the sun from 6,200 miles across the surface on the horizon. If I'm standing on the equator at equinox, I know that the sun is setting exactly 6,200 miles to my west on equinox for every location on Earth, right? We know that. We know that based on what we observe at the equator, where we are at the equator. If you're standing on the equator, that is the way that it would work. And that is where the map that I use gets really confusing, because it doesn't exactly work that way. The way that it's stitched together, and that's why it's not a perfect map. I'm not saying that it is, but the proof of concept in the map is what we're talking about. So we're starting out under Polaris, and as I move across the surface of the Earth, I want you to notice how it's kind of rocking back and forth. It doesn't matter what way I move. It's in every direction. It's going to roll the other way. In this case, we're going to move left and right. Okay, so we're moving to the right or we're moving to the left. This is going to be south, right? I'm moving south. See how wide the celestial equator is? The celestial equator, actually, the other rotation would be right here. So we're looking on a flat surface across what would be the equivalent of 3 circumpolar rotations as we're moving across the surface, because I made that celestial equator extra wide. The point of this is that if we're thinking about this mirror and we're thinking about moving across the surface on a flat surface, it has always been said that it's impossible to replicate this. But if we imagine it the way that the Bible, the way that the book of Enoch, which I believe should be a part of the canon, describes it, is the firmament. When I'm looking up in this direction, I'm looking up from this way, right? And as I move across the surface, I'm still looking up in this direction, but to get this direction, look how much my angle to the cosmos has changed below me, right? And so depending on where I'm standing in the surface, depends on which 50% of the cosmos that I can see below me. If I'm standing on the pole, I'm going to see the circumpolar rotation of those stars, which aren't in motion in the example, but they would do a counterclockwise rotation once a day. If we look at it, you can imagine these are the ones in the south. These would be doing a clockwise rotation. So you have a counterclockwise rotation here. You have a clockwise rotation here. We're looking at every latitude, right? Because now I'm at 90 south. We went to the celestial equator, and like I said, the celestial equator would actually be right here. I made it extra wide for the effect of it, right? To say, look, it's not impossible to see 2 different groups of stars. I can show you 3 different groups of stars moving across a flat surface, the equivalent of that mirror. It all depends on how wide it is below you, right? So if we're looking at this, if you look at where the pile of salts are, there's a pile here, there's a pile here. That's what you're looking at in the mirror, right? You didn't see me in the mirror. You saw the salt because of the way that the angle is to the surface here. But the point is that it's wider than the mirror, right? So the cosmos below us is wider than the sky. I haven't had a lot of time over the past couple of days, guys. I apologize for that. But I'm going to try to get to another video later today. I wanted to get any questions. I mean, if anybody watches this, obviously it's not getting a lot of views. But if anybody does watch this and you have any questions about it, please ask me, because I do have the answer and I can explain exactly how it works. And it's something that I can go over in the next video. But this video is showing you declination from 90 north to -90 south in every direction. If we keep moving, it would reset to the other side. in this concept. So if you have questions about it, please let me know, and I'll try to get to another video later today. If not, I'll make one tomorrow.